The neon sign outside Northside Logistics buzzed like a dying wasp, flickering red. Then nothing for half a heartbeat. Then red again. Claraara Hayes counted its pulse the way other people counted sheep. 15 minutes past 8 in the evening, and the building had long since emptied, except for the cleaning crew 2 floors up, and her. The battery acid drip of the office coffee maker had finally quit at 7, leaving the air stale and burnt. Her screen glowed blue against her face. Unpaid invoices. Mismatched SKUs. A carrier who refused to acknowledge $3,000 in damaged freight. She pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose. Read the same line twice. Read it a third time. The numbers didn't move. Somewhere beneath the curtain of exhaustion, a tiny mechanical part of her brain was still running the math. $6,000 a month. Chloe's private room at Oak Creek. The new titanium pin the surgeon had warned she'd need by spring. The premium surcharge the insurance company refused to cover because the facility was out of network. The supplementary oxygen. The bi-weekly physical therapy consults. 6,000. Every month. Forever. The neon sign buzzed. Outside, the first sleet of the season tapped at the window like a beggar's knuckle. Claraara Hayes, 26. Senior logistics coordinator, swallowed the hot coal in her throat and kept typing, her fingers finding the keys by memory and muscle and sheer refusal to lose her. Footing. Sarah? Saria. You back here? She didn't look up. She knew the voice the way you learned. The sound of a smoke detector, soft, insistent, perfectly calibrated to pretend it wasn't dangerous. Richard Davis rounded the corner of her cubicle wall. Late 40s. Soft in all the wrong places, soft jaw, soft belly, soft hands that sweated even in winter. His tie hung crooked. The top button of his shirt was missing, as though he had dressed in a hurry and lost interest halfway through. The synthetic pine of his cologne arrived before he did, cloying, artificial, like a forest painted on cardboard by a contractor who had never seen a forest. I've been waiting on those end-of-month discrepancies, he said, leaning a hip against her desk. He made himself small in a way that was the opposite of small. His eyes traveled the line of her neck, lingered at her collarbone, then traveled back up. You weren't going to leave before we squared those away, were you? Clara didn't blink. They're in the shared drive, Richard. Under Davis reconciliation. I've sent you the link twice. Twice, he smiled. The smile didn't reach his eyes. It didn't even attempt to. Look at you, all buttoned up. You know, you remind me of my ex-wife before I fixed her. He said, fixed the way you said broken? I'm good here, Richard. She said it in the flat, monotone register she had perfected at 22. No rise at the end. No inflection. That could be read as either invitation or insult. Just air pushed through teeth, shaped into syllables of pure, professional nothing. Let me ask you something. One drink. Downstairs at the Brick. You, me, half an hour. Then you go home to your sister. Claraara kept her eyes on the screen. My sister has care staff, Richard. I'm at work. Work? He echoed, drawing the word out behind his teeth. Right. Work. That's what you always say. Work. He pushed off the desk. As he turned to leave, his palm settled on her shoulder blade left side, just under the wing bone. He let it stay there a beat too long. His thumb traced a small, polite arc, the way a man traces an arc when he's marking inventory. Don't move. Don't flinch. Don't lose the insurance. Don't lose the 6,000. The titanium pin, the oxygen tank, the bi-weekly therapist. Don't lose your sister. Have a good night, Sarah. Same to you. The pine lingered in the empty air after he'd gone, hanging over the cubicle partition like a cheap funeral wreath. She rolled her shoulders once, slowly, and let the cold of the monitor burn the ghost touch out of her skin. And then she finished the quarterly. And then she went home. And then she did it again the next morning, because the math did not forgive deviation, and the math did not offer weekends, and the math did not take coffee breaks. In the weeks that followed, she tried to put the arc out of her mind the way she put all small injuries out of her mind with arithmetic, with denial, with the steady mechanical repetition of the next task and the next task and the next. 3 weeks back, the first time she'd noticed him, she'd been at the office, printer at 6:47 in the morning, swearing under her breath at the jam in tray 2, when a man had appeared beside her in the gray half-light. Tall, granite carved, a black wool coat dusted with the first frost of November. He hadn't introduced himself. He hadn't asked her to move. He'd simply reached past her careful, deliberate, with the slow economy of a surgeon, and pulled the tray free. One long finger drew out the crumpled sheet. Then he reset the plastic, pressed the green button, and was gone. 2 days later, she'd found a small white mug on her desk. Black tea, still steaming, no note. By the end of week 2, the pattern had settled into something almost geological. A mug, always black, always at the corner of her desk, sometimes still hot. Never a word. Claraara had turned the mug twice, looking for a fingerprint, a logo. Plain white porcelain, crescent moon etched in the base. Nothing else. She'd learned his name from the directory in the lobby. Leo Costello. Hush hush. Not even a headshot in the company email chain. The receptionist called him the other partner. A partner who materialized at the edges of the day like smoke from a struck match, and vanished the same way, leaving only the faint smell of cold stone. Thursday rolled around, and the copier jammed again. Claraara had been swearing under her breath, half crouched, half standing at the machine, when 2 large hands scarred across the knuckles. The ring finger on the left hand, wrapped in a thin white strip of tape, had reached past her and depressed the panel like a man popping a child-proof cap on a medicine bottle. He'd done it in 4 seconds, without looking at her, without speaking, without an apology or a self-introduction, as though the hand belonged to no one and the grace was the air conditioning. "Thank you," she'd said, the syllables coming out sharper than she meant, clipped by the corner of her own surprise. He'd straightened. 6'3" at least, the height of a doorframe and twice as still. Black suit, no tie, a charcoal overcoat that smelled faintly of cold stone and gun oil. He looked like a man who had been carved out of a mountain in another country and was now being asked as a diplomatic courtesy to pretend to be a person. He had nodded once. Then he'd turned and walked away down the hall, his leather soles padding soft on the cheap office carpet, each step a small, quiet signature. Claraara had watched the place where he'd stood. The air still smelled like cold stone. She had stood very still herself, the kind of still a person stands when they have just realized that the room they thought they were alone in had been occupied the whole time by a much larger animal, and that the animal had been paying attention. She held her breath for a count of 5 before she let herself exhale. She completed the copy job with her eyes down. She carried the pages to her desk and set them in the outbox, and she did not look up again until the sound of his shoes had disappeared entirely from the hallway. She told herself the fairy tale version on the walk home from the tea. The snow falling slow and indifferent around her shoulders. The boss noticed. The boss is kind. The boss brings you tea. And then she told herself the real one, because the real one had never lied to her yet. Men like this have a number. Men like this always have a number. Men like this will keep your sisters lights on for exactly as long as it takes to put you in a hotel room with a view of the harbor. Then the invoice arrives. The invoice always arrives. She believed the second version. She'd believed it since she was 19 and the bank had called her mother's mortgage past due. She'd believed it since 22 and the headhunter who had smiled at her across a hotel bar and then introduced her to a job that paid half what he'd promised. She'd believed it since 24 and the boyfriend of 6 months who had emptied the joint checking account on a Thursday afternoon. She believed the second version the way you believed gravity, because every fall had proved it. Claraara Hayes didn't believe in tea. She believed in arithmetic. And the arithmetic of 3 free cups of black tea over 21 days was not yet. Don't read into it. Don't read into it. Do not read into it. She walked the rest of the way home with her collar turned up and her eyes on the pavement. She did not, on the way home, allow herself to think about what kind of man kept a porcelain mug of black tea on a stranger's desk for 3 weeks without ever once leaving a note. She did not allow herself to consider what kind of man unjammed a copy machine in 4 seconds without looking at the woman beside him, as though the woman were furniture and the jam were the only event worth attending. 2. She walked, and she subtracted, and she kept her face straight against the wind. She got home. She boiled water. She made her own black tea in a chipped mug that said "World's Best Aunt" in fading gold letters. She drank it standing up at the kitchen counter. She did not think about him. She thought about money. Then came the Tuesday that changed everything. It was a Tuesday night, pushing past 8. The quarterly financials had eaten her alive. 6 hours of cross-references, 47 flagged line items, each with its own poison letter. 3 calls to the bank, 2 calls to the freight broker, 1 crying session in the supply closet that she would have denied under oath. The sleet had thickened into freezing rain, smearing the window panes into a moving gray wash, the streetlights smearing into wet ribbons of orange. The cleaning crew was gone. The lights on the upper floors had gone dark, one by one, like the building was closing its eyes. Claraara hit save. The little spinning wheel on. Her screen hesitated, then settled. She exhaled, a thin white plume in the too cold office air. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. She was not alone. The office was a museum after hours. The way every office becomes a museum after hours, the same furniture, the same fluorescent lights, the same hum of the vending machine in the break room, but emptied of every person who had ever made it feel like a place where something other than work could happen. She smelled it before she saw it, the sharp, stinging tang of whiskey cutting through the cold pine of his cologne. Drunk enough now to lose the cover-up. Drunk enough now to stop pretending he was collegial. Full Moon Tuesday. You're always here. On full moons. Sarah. Richard Davis stood at the entrance to her cubicle. His tie was yanked loose. 2 buttons of his collar hung open, exposing the pale, soft underside of his throat. His face had gone soft and red, the way cheap meat goes soft and red when it's left out too long. He held a half-empty tumbler of something amber in his right hand. He was smiling, the way a man smiled when he'd stopped asking permission, a smile that took up the entire bottom half of his face and gave nothing back. She reached for her purse. He shifted his weight forward, almost imperceptibly, like an animal adjusting the angle of attack. Leaving. To your sister. He nodded. Exaggerated sympathy. Always your sister. You know, Sarah. I've been watching you for months now. You don't laugh. You don't go out. You don't let anyone in. He stepped a half-inch closer. Why is that? Because I have work in the morning. You have work in the morning. Always. Every morning for the rest of your life. You'll have work. His voice dropped into the register men used when they wanted you to remember the drop. What if I told you there was another way? Claraara's grip on her purse tightened until the leather creaked. Richard, I'm serious. He leaned in. The whiskey hit her like a slap. You think I don't see the way you look? At that other one? The big, quiet one. Costello. He laughed. You think he's going to save you? A man like that? A man like that buys you. Sarah. He doesn't save you. He writes your name on a tag and pins it to a wall. He was 3 feet away now. She tried to step past him. He moved. Quick. Practice quick. A man who had done this enough times to have it rehearsed. His body filled the narrow mouth of the cubicle, blocking the only exit. He wasn't even looking at her face anymore. He was looking at her mouth. Don't be like that, he said softly. Don't be cold. I can make this easier on you. I've made it easier on a lot of women. That's what a manager does. Sarah. We make things easier. Claraara stepped back. Her spine touched the cold metal edge of her desk. The monitor's blue light flickered twice and held. She could feel the coffee stain on her sleeve where she'd spilled it at 4. She could feel how wet the backs of her knees had gone. She could feel the math collapsing in. Her head 6,000, 6,000, 6,000 like a tower of wooden blocks tipping in slow motion. Richard, step back. Or what? You'll quit? He smiled, drunk and slow. You can't quit. Who's going to pay for your sister? Who's going to pay for the facility? Who's going to keep the lights on at Oak Creek? Sarah? Who's going to keep your sister breathing? He pressed forward. The cubicle shrank around. Them. I can take care of that. That's all I'm saying. I can take care of you. All you have to do is his hand landed first. A clamp of damp, heavy fingers on her shoulder, right above the collarbone, his thumb pressing in hard enough to dimple the skin beneath the bone. His other hand drifted to her hip, a long, exploratory slide that stopped at the curve. Possessive slow, the way a man touched a piece of furniture he had just realized he owned. His face leaned in. The whiskey and the pine collided in the small space between, them fighting for room. His breath was hot, hamster breath hot. The cheap kind of hot that comes from a 6-pack and a late shift. His eyes were dead. The way a slot machine's eyes are dead empty and waiting for input. Claraara's calculating mind went silent. She was not a person in a cubicle anymore. She was a rabbit at the edge of a field, the dog 3 inches away, the world reduced to heat and smell, and the white noise in her skull. The kind of white noise that comes from the inside of a seashell held up to the ocean of your own body. Don't move. Don't speak. Don't give him a reason. 6,000. 6,000. 6,000. She didn't speak. He pressed his thumb in. Harder. She felt the bone beneath the skin give a tiny, polite shudder of protest, and her vision narrowed to a single point of light at the center of her own forehead, and she thought, very clearly this is how it ends. In an office on a Tuesday, for $6,000 a month, and a sister who will never know how I went. Then from the far end of the floor, the heavy, metallic clack of the main office door unlocking, traveling the dark hallway like a struck bell. The sound traveled the length of the empty floor like a church bell in a snowfield, each long, ringing second shaving a sliver of confidence off the man at her hip. Click. Then, from the stairwell, the unmistakable sound of leather soles on cheap linoleum. Slow. Measured. A man's gait that did not hurry because it had never needed to hurry. Each footstep a punctuation mark, a sentence that ended in a period, never a question mark. The recurring leitmotif she had not heard until now because she had only watched it pass in the periphery. Harmless. The way you watch weather cross a horizon. Clara's breath caught in her throat like a fish on a hook. Richard's hand on her hip tightened, then went very still. The sound was a small, broken thing halfway between a gasp and a swallow, the kind of involuntary noise a body makes when it has been holding itself together for the better part of an hour and has been given Suddenly, and without warning, a reason not to. Leo Costello rounded the corner of the partition. He was dusted, in melting snow. His black overcoat sat on his shoulders like a thrown shadow. He carried no briefcase. He carried no folder. He was looking, with absolute, almost bored precision, at the exact point where Richard's thumb pressed into Claraara's collarbone. 10 feet away, he stopped. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 4 degrees in a single breath. Then 4 more. Leo's pale gray eyes lifted from Richard's hand to Richard's face. He did not blink. He did not speak. The silence he brought with him was the silence of a churchyard at 3 a.m, heavy, even, perfectly still. Richard's hand slid off Claraara's hip as if it had been burned. "Boss," Richard said. The word came out 2 octaves too high. We were just the quarterly. The discrepancies, Leo said nothing. He looked at Claraara. For one fraction of a second, a sliver of time so thin you could cut yourself on it, his gaze crossed her face, and something in it cracked open, only to be clamped shut an instant later. She saw it. She saw the flash of dark possessive fury that lived behind the granite. She saw the cold, almost surgical promise that there would be a price for this. There would be a price paid in full, paid in cash, paid in installments of bone. The silence in the room became a held breath, and then Leo spoke. "I came back for the ledger," Leo said. His voice was low. Register of a cello played in an empty room. He didn't raise it. He didn't need to. The syllables fell like ice into a glass, each one a small, clean fracture in the air. "Which ledger?" "The one I keep in the drawer by the window. 3rd cabinet. 2nd drawer." Leo's eyes drifted to the window behind Claraara's head. "I need it before Wednesday." Richard was already nodding. Of course. Of course. I'll get it for you." He tried to step past. He did not get past. Leo's left hand moved. It was not a punch. It was a seizure, a long, scalded-looking grip around the meat of Richard's throat, the thumb finding the soft hollow beneath the jaw and digging in, the fingers spreading across the windpipe like an announcement of closure. Richard's tumbler shattered somewhere against the floor, tinkling cheap and bright and obscene against the linoleum. He made a thin, wet noise that may have been a word and was more likely a prayer. Leo walked him backward step by patient step, until Richard's spine slammed into the metal filing cabinet with a sound like a slamming locker door. The cabinet shuddered. Popcorn ceiling dust drifted down in a fine, gray snow. Richard's face went from red to purple. "Don't," he tried. "Hush," Leo said. Holding Richard pinned by the throat with the flat of his forearm, Leo reached with his free hand and lifted Richard's right hand, the hand that had been on Claraara's hip, and held it up between them the way a man held up a small, ugly fish he had caught against his will and was now inspecting for evidence. Richard's mouth opened. Leo's thumb found the base of Richard's index finger. He bent it backward. The sound was a sharp, wet pop. Not loud, not cinematic. The small, damp sound of cartilage leaving a joint. The index finger folded the wrong way. The middle finger followed. A half-second later, Richard screamed. It wasn't a brave scream. It was small and high. The kind of sound a rabbit makes when the trap closes. Richard's face went from purple to white. Leo's forearm stayed pressed into his windpipe. "One more," Leo said, "and the ring finger." "I have time." Richard wet himself. The acrid stink of it bloomed across the linoleum and smacked Claraara in the face. The cheap, sour smell of cowardice finally catching up to its owner. Leo leaned in. His lips almost brushed the lobe of Richard's ear. "If you ever look at her again," he whispered, "if you ever speak her name, If you ever breathe in her direction, I will not kill you. That would be a mercy. His thumb pressed a fraction harder into Richard's throat. A coal going to white. I will erase you. So completely. So slowly in so many pieces. That by the time it's done, you will get down on your knees in whatever is left of your body and beg God to send you to hell. The faintest crack of a smile. Where? He added softly. The weather is warm. He let go. Richard dropped. Richard hit the floor like a sack of wet laundry. He curled around his hand, making sounds that weren't quite words, that were more like furniture being moved across a wooden floor. He didn't try to stand. He didn't try to run. He lay where he had been put. He had been put on the floor, and on the floor he would stay. Leo drew a fresh, pristine white handkerchief from his breast pocket. He unfolded it slowly, with the unhurried dignity of a priest preparing the host. He cleaned each of his fingers. He cleaned the heel of his thumb. He cleaned the meat of his palm. He did not look at Richard as he did it. He did not need to. Richard was a piece of furniture now. A piece of furniture that had tried to touch something that belonged to the house. He dropped the handkerchief onto Richard's bowed head, white on dark hair, like the first snow of a season no one had asked for. You're fired, Leo said, without inflection. Security will escort you out in 11 minutes. Your severance has been terminated as of 8:04 p.m. By morning, every recruiter in the tri-state area will have been informed that you are not to be hired. By lunch, your wife will have received a packet. By dinner, the Commonwealth will have been informed. Don't stand up until I leave the floor. He turned to Claraara. Her face was the color of milk. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were wide and dry, the way a desert is wide and dry, a surface that had given up trying to produce anything else. I'm going to take you home, he said. She didn't argue. She didn't have the architecture for an argument. She didn't have anything except the cold, clean distance between the inside of her body and the outside of the air. Outside the building, a matte black SUV the size of a small bank was waiting at the curb, smelling of cold leather and cedar. The windows were tinted so dark the streetlights came through as thin, liquid gold. The back seat was wide enough to seat 3 men in suits. Claraara sat as far from the door as the seatbelt would let her. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her knuckles were white. The pine of Richard's cologne still ran down the side of her neck like a stain. You're a monster, she said. Yes, he said. Eyes on the windshield. You killed that man. I broke 2 of his fingers. You killed the man he was going to be. Leo said nothing to that. The SUV turned onto the on-ramp and merged with the frozen traffic like a shark slipping back into a school of fish. And what? She said, her voice cracking for the first time that night, splitting along a seam she had not known was there. What kind of man breaks a man's fingers in front of a woman he's already planning to take home? He turned his head a fraction of an inch. Gray eyes. Cold. The temperature they carried was the temperature of deep water, of wells that had never seen the sun. A man who's been watching a woman work 14-hour days for 3 years to keep her sister breathing, he said quietly. A man who has noted that her car is held together with electrical tape. A man who has noted the $6,000 line item that leaves her account on the first of every month like rent paid to an indifferent landlord. A man who has seen her sell her lunch back to the vending machine in the basement so she can take a cab home to a studio apartment she shares with a radiator that doesn't work. That's not you are exactly that, he said. And I have paid your sister's $80,000 medical debt through the end of the fiscal year. It was transferred at 6:14 this evening, before you hit save on your quarterly. Claraara's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. You. Can't I can. I didn't ask you to. You didn't. I did. It offended me. A woman of your work ethic and your spine should not be forced to negotiate her dignity with a man like that. So I fixed it. Fixed it. Yes. She pressed her forehead against the cold window. The freezing rain streaked past in long, silver lines, smearing the streetlights into wet ribbons of orange. She wanted to scream. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to throw herself out of the moving vehicle and let the snow have her. You bought me, she whispered. I did not buy you. His voice had not changed. It would never change. It was the voice of a continent. I bought a broken system. You were collateral damage in the same operation. There is a difference. The SUV pulled up outside a building she had never seen from this angle. It was the back of Apex, Global Freight, the legitimate arm of Leo Costello's empire, the same empire that owned Northside Logistics and half the warehouses along the Mystic, and, if the rumors were true, a great deal of the coastline that the trucks carried freight along. The lobby was marble. The elevator alone had a security guard, and the security guard had a security guard. You will be logistics director here as of next month, Leo said. Salary tripled. Benefits reinstated. Your sister will be on the company's platinum plan. You will report to me. You will not be touched, spoken to about, or approached by anyone in this building without written clearance from my office. By morning, your car will have been detailed. By afternoon, your landlord will be informed that the radiator in 4B has been condemned. By the end of the week, the windows will close. You can't, I can. You can't just, I'm a person, not an asset, I am aware, he said, and for the first time, something almost soft, almost, not quite lived at the corner of his mouth. The way a leaf lives at the edge of a chimney before the wind takes it. I have made you something. You will decide what to do with it. That is all I can offer. That is all any man can offer. The woman decides. The man builds the door. The woman walks through it, or doesn't. That is the only contract I will ever sign. The SUV idled. She stared at him. Why? He looked out the window, at the falling snow, at a city that had been his to rearrange for many years. Because I do not like the way you flinch, he said. The word sat between them like a live coal, glowing red at the edges but refusing to go out. Claraara said, Take me home. He said, Yes, ma'am. The next morning at 7:55, a black sedan idled outside her crumbling apartment in Brighton. The driver's side window was up. A man in a black suit, broad as a refrigerator, his hair the color of iron, stood waiting at her door with a thick manila envelope and Claraara's car keys fanned out across his palm like a hand of cards. Miss Hayes. Mr. Costello sends his regards. He says you misplaced these. He placed the keys in her palm. He handled her the way one handles a small, injured bird. He also says he likes the car and would prefer you not to die in it, which, given the condition of the front driver's strut, was a real possibility. The envelope contained a contract, a title, Director of Logistics, Apex Global Freight, a salary figure that made her sit down on her unmade bed and stare at the ceiling, a medical plan so comprehensive it read less like a contract and more like science fiction, every imaginable contingency pre-addressed in clean, numbered paragraphs, a handwritten note on cream paper in a hand that looked like it had been taught writing with a ruler. You are not in my debt. The system was broken. I broke it differently. She sat on the bed for a long time, holding the note between two fingers like a woman who had just been handed an object whose weight she did not yet understand. By morning, she packed a bag and went to see her sister. At 9:14 in the morning, Claraara walked into Oak Creek Care Facility. Her sister, Chloe, 23, tucked into a specialty wheelchair designed to support a spine that had been broken in. 3 places in a car accident that was not her fault, Chloe looked up from. A jigsaw puzzle she had been working on for 6 weeks and would, Claraara knew, never finish. "You're gray," Chloe said. "I'm always gray." "No. You were gray because of the bad man at the old job. You said so. You were gray before, and you were gray during, and you were gray after." Chloe tilted her head, a gesture so precise it looked choreographed. "You're not gray today. You're something else. You're kind of pink." Claraara sat down on the floor next to her sister's chair. She put her head in Chloe's lap. She cried for 90 seconds, very quietly, the way grown women cry when the child in them has finally been given permission to let go of the rope. "I got a new job," she said. "Good?" Chloe asked. "Good. The mean man gone?" "Gone. I want a new blanket. The blue one. The soft one. I'll get you 3. Claraara lifted her head. She looked at her sister's face. She thought of the contract in the manila envelope. She thought of Leo Costello's hand on her shoulder that had not been a hand at all, but an offer written in pressure and silence. She thought of $6,000 a month and what it would mean to never have to count it again. What it would mean to spend Sunday mornings reading the paper instead of running the math. Then she thought of the note. "You are not in my debt." Chloe reached up with her good hand, the one that still worked, and tucked a strand of hair behind Claraara's ear. "You smell different," Chloe said. "You smell like the cold. The good kind of cold. The kind that comes after the storm, when all the dirty snow has been washed off the cars." Claraara laughed. It surprised her. She had forgotten, in 3 years, what her own laugh sounded like. She went home, put on the gray suit, and sharpened her pencil until the tip gleamed like a small, dangerous star. 3 weeks into the new life, on a Wednesday afternoon, she made her move. Leo's office sat on the 41st floor, with a wall of glass that looked out over the seaport. The afternoon sun laid itself across the mahogany desk in long, narrow strips. He was reading a ledger. He did not look up when she walked in. She dropped the signed contract on his desk like a thrown gauntlet. "With conditions," she said. He looked up. "I am not your pet," she said. "I am not your property. I am not Mafia collateral. I will do the job. I will do it better than anyone you've ever hired. I will not cook your dinners. I will not powder your nose. I will not sit in the back of your armored SUV and tremble in pretty clothes. If you ever put your hands on me without my permission, I will leave this building and never come back. And your $80,000 will be the cheapest lesson you have ever paid for, and the most expensive mistake you have ever made." She pointed a finger at his chest. Her hand did not shake. It was the first time in the entire story that her hand had not shaken. "Those," she said, "are the only terms I will accept. Draw them up, or rip them up." Leo stared at her. The expression on his face was one she had never seen before. Not on him, not on anyone. It was not anger. It was not surprise. It was the expression of a man who had been standing in a long, dark hallway for many years and had just heard a door open at the end of it, light falling through the crack in a thin gold line across the floor. Then he stood. He came around the desk. He stopped 3 inches from her hand. He took her hand, the one pointing at his chest, and, very gently, lowered it. His thumb settled over her knuckles, the scarred hand, the taped ring finger, warm, heavy. "Sure. 3 rules," he said quietly. "Not yours, mine." He lifted his eyes to hers. "I do not buy people. I do not own people. And you," he said, are entirely out of bounds to the rest of the world. No one in this city, this country, or this life will touch you. You are mine to protect, not mine to own. If you ever want to leave, the door is unbarred. The salary transfers with you. The medical plan transfers with you. The debt does not exist. And the third? She whispered. His thumb traced a small, polite arc across her knuckles. The same arc Richard had traced across her shoulder blade 3 weeks ago. The same arc, the opposite meaning. The first arc had been a man marking inventory. The second arc was a man offering a doorway. Stop carrying the weight of the world alone, he said. Let me fight your wars. You have fought them long enough. You have fought them since you were 19. You have fought them until your shoulders are made of wire. Let me hold the door. You decide when to walk through. The afternoon? Sun laid itself across the floor in long, narrow strips. Somewhere far below, the harbor bells rang. The way they ring every half hour, whether anyone is listening or not. Claraara Hayes stood in the office of a man who could have any woman in the city, and he was looking at her the way a man looks at the end of a long war, not with triumph, not with relief, but with the quiet, exhausted recognition of someone who has finally stopped running from the thing they were running toward. She didn't pull her hand back. What happens now? She asked. Now, Leo Costello said, I take you to dinner. And you tell me what kind of tea you actually like, and not the polite answer, the real one. And we begin. 6 weeks later, the war had gone quiet. It had been 6 weeks since Claraara Hayes had flinched at the sound of her own front door closing. The apartment had new windows. The double-pane kind that closed all the way. The radiator worked quietly, the way good radiators do when no one has threatened them. The kitchen counter held a small velvet box that had not been opened, but whose presence had been explained, in a single line of handwriting, by the man who had placed it there. Inside was a signed agreement. Oak Creek's full operating budget, underwritten indefinitely by a foundation that did not have a name, that could not be traced. The agreement covered the new titanium pin, the biweekly physical therapy, the supplementary oxygen, and the supplementary nurse. Chloe had 3 new blankets, the blue one, the soft one, and a third one she had picked herself, in a color that had no name but that Claraara thought of, privately, as the color of being safe. And in the dark of his apartment, 6 weeks after she'd first flinched at his touch, Claraara stood in her bare feet on a cold hardwood floor and let him wrap his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on the crown of her head, his breath slow against her hair. She did not flinch. He did not push. The window was open. The harbor bells were ringing at the far end of an evening, close to a silence you could rest inside. Claraara, he said into her hair. Yes. Stay. Yes. She turned in his arms. She rose, on the toes of her bare feet. She pressed her mouth against the corner of his jaw, the place where the stone of his face finally gave way to something human. She felt the warmth of it. She felt the catch of his breath. The night came, down over the city like velvet over a wound. And in that small, quiet domestic space, the radiator humming, the harbor bells fading, the new windows closed all the way, the snow falling slow and indifferent on a city that was no longer asking anything of her, the war that had been lived in cold corridors and fluorescent lights finally, diminished to the size of 2 people breathing together in the dark. She kissed him back. The snow fell. They let it.